Hey first graders, it's Mrs. Seals and I'm back for our next science lab. So we have been talking about different ways that we can describe objects. We've talked about describing objects by shape. We've talked about describing objects by their weight, which means if they're heavy or light. And we've also talked about how we can describe objects by their texture or how they feel. Today we're going to be talking about how we can change objects. And one way that we can change objects is by heating them up. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that first, and then we're going to do a fun experiment. Are you ready? Oh goodness, let me get this ready. Okay, so this says changes caused by heating. It says I can predict and identify changes in materials caused by heating. So look at this picture right here. I have a picture of some ice cubes and then I have a picture of water. So maybe that's a little hint to you about what we're going to be talking about. So it says how can we change objects by adding heat? Some objects change when heat is added. This is called melting. Objects lose their shape and get softer. Can you think of some things that can melt? So in just a second, I would like for you to pause the video and I want you to talk to your mom or dad or grandma or whoever is there with you and see if you can think of some things that you know that can melt. Maybe you've seen them melt before. Maybe you've accidentally melted them before by leaving them in your hot car. Think of some things that can melt and then come back so we can talk about them. Here are some things I thought of: ice, chocolate, butter, cheese, crayons, candles, and marshmallows. These are all things that can melt. And when they melt, what happens is they get softer. They lose their shape. Maybe they spread out and take the shape of whatever container they're in. Maybe they turn into what we call a liquid. Right now, all of these objects are what we call solids, and once heat is added to them and they melt, they can turn into a liquid. Even if they don't fully turn into a liquid, they definitely get softer, mushier, they lose their shape. So today we're going to do an experiment. We are going to melt 4 things to see which one melts the fastest or which one melts the most in the amount of time we give them. Here's the objects we're going to melt. We are going to be melting butter. Let me get my butter and show you. I have all my objects in a baggie right here. There's the butter. We're going to be melting a candle, like a birthday candle. We're going to be melting chocolate chips. There's 3 in there. And we're going to be melting ice. Here's my bowl of ice. I haven't put it into a baggie yet. I'm waiting until the last second. Okay? So before we do the experiment, I want you to make a hypothesis, which hopefully you remember from the past couple weeks. This is a prediction or a guess about what's going to happen in our experiment. So which one do you think is going to melt the fastest, and why do you think that? Okay? Also, which one of these things do you think will melt the slowest, and why do you think that? So remember the very first science lab that I did with you guys when everybody was learning from home a couple weeks ago, I said that when a scientist makes a hypothesis, it's what we call an educated guess. And that means they use what they already know. They take their background knowledge, they take things that they have seen or done before, and they use that information to help them make their hypothesis or their prediction. It doesn't matter if your prediction turns out to be wrong because it's just a guess. It's just what you think will happen. So I want you to pause the video, talk to whoever is sitting there with you and tell them, do you think the butter, candle, chocolate chip, or ice is going to melt the fastest, and why do you think that? And do you think the butter, candle, chocolate chip, or ice is going to melt the slowest, and why do you think that? When you're ready, come back and then we will do the experiment. All right, so to do this experiment, we have to add heat because remember, if we are going to melt something, we have to add heat to it. That's how we melt things. So in this case, our heat is going to be, our heat source is going to be hot water. So in here, I have water that has been warmed up. It's not super duper hot, but it's warm. And that's gonna be our heat source. So I have these 4 bowls right here. So what's going to happen is I'm going to put warm water in each of these 4 bowls. Okay, and then I'm going to place the baggie of the objects in the bowl, and I'm not going to touch it, and I'm going to let it sit for maybe a couple of minutes, and then when the time is up, we're going to look at our objects and see if we can determine which one has melted the most and which one has melted the least. Remember, when things melt, they lose their shape. All of these objects right now have their own shape. These chocolate chips, can you see them? They're like little circles on the bottom, and then they're kind of pointy triangles. So they have their own shape. But when they melt, they get soft, they get squishy, they get mushy, and they kind of spread out. When ice melts, it doesn't stay an ice cube, it turns into water. Did you know that? Water is the liquid form of ice. So we will know that the ice cube has melted if we don't see an ice cube anymore, but we kind of see just like a puddle of water. Okay, same with the butter and the crayon. When they melt, they're going to lose their shape and get softer. These objects might not melt completely in the time we're giving them, but they will at least definitely start to melt. Okay, so I'm going to pour some water in each of these bowls. Ooh, can you see the steam coming up? This is hot water. And I'll move my screen down in just a second so you can see better. Add a little bit more. All right, so I have my hot water. That's our heat source. Remember, anytime we're going to melt something, we have to add heat to it. So there's our heat. All right, woo, I hope I don't spill. That would be bad. All right, I'm gonna move my camera down so you can see. Oh, one more thing I gotta do before we can start is I'm going to put some ice cubes in the baggie. All right, there's my ice cubes. You see them? They have their own shape. They're like little squares. I know that they're solids. All right, so in just a second, I'm gonna put my objects in the heat. We're gonna watch and see what happens, and then I will take them out so we can look at them. All right, so they're all, woo, hot. Let me get some paper towels. All right, let's see what happens. Actually, what I'm gonna also do is I'm gonna use this pencil to kind of poke them with to make sure they stay under the water, because we wanna make sure they're getting all that heat. Wow, I already see some things happening. Whoa. I already see a lot of things happening. I think my ice is already completely melted. So here's the chocolate chips, the butter, the ice, and the candle. I know you can't really see right now, but in just a couple of minutes, maybe a minute or two more, I'm going to pick them up and show you so we can talk about the changes that we see happening, okay? And the changes that have occurred. So we're waiting a little bit longer to see what happens to our objects. There's my chocolate chips, my butter, my ice cubes, and my candle. All right, so this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take the objects out. I'm not gonna show them to you just yet. I'm gonna kind of dry the bags off so I don't make a big mess on my table. And then, oh my goodness, look at that butter. And then we will talk about them. The ice and the candle. Wow. All right, let me move these bowls of water out of the way so I don't spill. Because you know Miss Seal spills all the time. All right. Okay, so let us talk about this. So here is, let's start with the candle. Here is the candle. Remember what it looked like before. It had those, oh my goodness, I'm dripping on my computer. Hold on. Oh, the seals, get it together. So here is the candle. Before it had those white and pink stripes. It definitely does not anymore. When I touch it, I can kind of still see the shape of the candle. Watch what happens when I turn the bag. When I turn the bag, it doesn't move with the bag. So that tells me it's not completely a liquid yet, but it's definitely changed shape, hasn't it? It definitely looks different than it did when I put it in the water. It's gotten softer, it's gotten squishier, its colors have all kind of mushed together. It still has a little bit of a shape though, right? Okay, there's our candle. Then here is the ice. Look at the ice. The ice cube is completely gone, and all I have is this bag full of water. So the ice completely melted. It completely lost its shape. We could say that it turned from a solid into a liquid in that amount of time that it was in the hot water. All right, then, oh goodness, are you ready? Look at the butter. Holy moly, the butter has almost completely melted too. As I turn this bag, the butter moves with the bag. That's something special about liquids, is they move and flow and take the shape of the container they're in. So as I turn this bag, the butter is moving with the bag. I can't see, remember when I put the butter in here and it was almost like a rectangle or a square? It's not anymore, is it? It has completely melted. It's lost its shape and it's very soft. And then the last one we have to look at is the chocolate chips. Look at the chocolate chips. Now, look, they still kind of have their shape. They don't look exactly the same. Remember, they had those pointy kind of tops on them. They don't have that anymore, but I still see circles. It's a little bit harder to tell them apart from each other because they've kind of squished together, right? They are soft. They're much softer than the candle. So I would say that they did melt more than the candle. Okay, so if we had to rank them in order, this is what I would say. I would say that the ice melted the fastest. It is completely liquefied. It's water. There's no more solid ice cube, and it melted really fast. Within just a couple of seconds of being in that hot water, it changed from a solid to a liquid and lost its shape. So the ice melted the fastest. So let me put the ice there. Then we have the butter. Because the butter completely melted and turned into a liquid just like the ice, but it took a little bit longer. The ice was almost immediate when I put it in the hot water, and the butter took a little bit longer, but it did completely melt. It did turn into a liquid. Okay, so we have ice first, then we have butter, then I would say chocolate chips, because the reason I would say the chocolate chips melted a little bit more than the candle is because they're much softer and squishier. And look, the more I push on them, the less I can tell. Now I can't even see the separate chocolate chips. I just see one big kind of chocolate blob because they have all melted together and they're soft. If we were to continue heating them up and melting the chocolate chips, they could become a liquid just like the ice cube and the water and the butter. Okay, and then the thing that I think melted the least, but still melted a lot, was this candle. And the reason that I'm going to say that it melted the slowest is just because I can still kind of see its shape, at least more than the chocolate chips, right? And when I push on it, it's much harder. It's not soft and squishy and gooey like the chocolate chips. So that tells me that it has a little bit longer ways to go before it's completely liquefied. Okay, so again, the results of our experiment were that the ice melted the fastest, the butter melted the second fastest, then the chocolate chips, and then the candle. Were your predictions right? Did you guess the order correctly? If you did, that's awesome. But guess what? If you didn't, that's still awesome, because even if you didn't guess the right the right way at the beginning, hopefully you learned something from this experiment, and now you know that ice melts really, really, really super fast, and butter melts pretty fast too, and chocolate chips and candles need a little bit more time. I hope that you had fun with that experiment. This is something that if you want to do at home with your parents and you have permission from them and you have their supervision, this could be something fun for you to do. You could maybe see what other objects melt. But again, make sure that you are not doing this or any other experiment by yourself. Make sure you have a grown-up with you. Make sure you have permission in order to do any science experiments, because I don't want anybody getting hurt. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you had fun, and I will see you next time. Bye, first graders.